Hey, what's going on, guys? It's James here with your second video. This will be for the second homework problem from Tuesday, or whatever you want to call it, the stuff we went over in class. Get the oldest member of the family they have to loop with. Ian had, I think, the answer in the Slack channel, so I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this stuff out. Actually, I'm going to comment this out real quick. Bum, 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 bum. Save it. I'm going to uncomment this stuff right here. Save it. And if you followed along in my first video, you'll remember that I made a variable called fam. And all fam is equal to is me.familyMembers. Family members is an array of objects. So I went ahead and refactored Ian's code. Anywhere I saw me.familyMembers, I replaced with fam. So fam.length, famj, these are all my variables. So let's go ahead and run Ian's code here. And here we go. Oh, whoops, let me make my comments out. Poor planning on my part. All right, let's try this again. So, cool. Ian has it set up. My oldest family member is Deb. Their age is 62. Let's just go ahead and check that guy out real quick and make sure this is right. Deb, Ron, L, and La, 62. Cool, that's right. So there is a lot going on here. And one of the concepts that this kind of touches on is called scope. And scope is a very important concept for web developers. It's something that you have to be constantly aware of, and it can become really confusing. So this is like a little bit more complicated than just navigating objects and arrays. And I was trying to think the best way to explain this to you guys, but when I was going through this, it just got super convoluted with variables and console logs, and it got really hard to follow. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to write a new loop that just deals with one array and of numbers. And I'm going to tackle it that way. So let's go ahead and check this guy out. So I've made an array of a few numbers here. And let's say that I want to, so for this, I want to return the largest, L-A-R-G, largest number in the array. Okay? So it's essentially what we're doing up here, but I've tried to break it down. All right, now what scope is? Scope is basically where a variable and its value is available in a function. And for you guys, I know you guys are just getting into functions, but for the purpose of this lesson and the purpose of the second homework question, all you guys need to know about functions are anywhere you see a parentheses followed by a bracket and a closing bracket, that's a function. So if you look up on this problem, you notice there are two functions, right? And I've basically replicated it down here. This for loop is a function, and this if statement is a function. Now notice that, oh my gosh, my alarm's going off. Stop. Time to do laundry. You'll notice that this if statement is housed inside of this for loop. Now, scope dictates that any variable that I declare in the containing function is available to both functions. But anything that I declare in this guy right here is not necessarily available to this guy right here. So I can put a variable inside of here, and this function will have no idea what it is. In fact, it'll overwrite it. We'll get into that in a second. Also, anything that I declare outside of my function is a global variable, and both functions have access to it. So that's a lot to think about. I'm going to walk this kind of Crayola style, break it down step by step so you guys can really see what's going on. So the first thing that I have set up here is an array of numbers, and I want to return the largest number in the array. So if we go through our regular for loop, if we go through array.length, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 iterations, right? There are seven in here, so to go through 0, which have 6 indexes, right? So I've set, array I is obviously each index in the array. So at I starting at 0 will be 1, right? That makes sense. This guy right here is the first index in the array. And I want to compare it to the rest of the numbers in there. Now the issue becomes I don't have really a good way of holding on to the number, right? It just seems like it'll get wiped out. If I keep using array I every time, I'm not going to be able to compare it. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've made compare equal to array I. Now, also keep in mind that we don't hit this if statement, right? So I've created a condition that says if array I is less than compare, then we're going to do this. And what basically I've done inside of here is say I'm going to make compare equal to whatever index we're on, that number. And that way I go ahead and grab that number and hold on to it, and I can pass it through all the way around these functions. So let's go ahead and just take a look at this real quick. So I'm going to run it. Did I comment this guy? I did. Cool. So first thing I want you guys to notice, this doesn't know what compare is, right? Compare is defined nowhere else. I set compare inside of this function, but this outer function doesn't know what compare is. So it's never going to make it here. So let's go ahead and uncomment this guy out. I just set compare to 0, okay? And I've gone ahead and console.logged. This is array I, so actually I'm going to uncomment that out. I'm going to do compare real quick. And this way we can go ahead and take a look at what compare is at every stage, at every iteration. So I'm going to kill this over here so it's cleaner to see. All right, let's go ahead and break this down. So at the first iteration, compare at start is 0. That makes sense, right? We expected it to be 0 because we have it set here. Now this is compare now at 1. So compare is 0, array I is going to equal to 1, right? So at the first iteration, array I, which is going to be array 0, so index 0 is going to equal 1. So 1 is greater than 0, which means we now drop down into my function. So compare, right, now becomes array 0, which is 1. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Compare now is going to be 1, and that's how we hold on to it and pass it all the way through. Now, oh shit, look what happens as I come back to the start of this function. I no longer have access to compare. Compare gets overwritten. It's no longer going to be what I wanted it to be, right? And so each time we come through this, through each iteration, I'm setting compare back to 0. That does us 0 good. You notice that my loop still runs, correct? Right? I have 1, 4, 3, 7, 10, 15, and 2. That's what we expect to happen. But it's really not being compared to anything, not dynamically. It's being compared to a static variable that I've declared. So there's got to be a better way then to do this. Remember what I said in the beginning about scope and where these variables are allowed to be used in each function. Now if I move this dude, and oh my gosh, and I uncomment it out here, right? Let me delete this, save it. Now notice that I've set compare to 0 in the very beginning of this. Now watch what happens when I run this function. Compare is at 0, right? That's what we thought it was going to be. And now let's see, array I, so array at index 0 is going to equal 1. 1 is greater than 0. So now we're going to come down here and make compare equal to 1. Cool, so now compare is set right here at 1. Now notice that it doesn't come back up and grab compare again because we've declared it inside of this function. It's equivalent to 1. And it's going to stay that way the entire way through until it meets this, this purpose here. So the first iteration, index 1. Compare at start is now going on to the second iteration is going to be 1. That's how it has, that's how we know inside the function what's going on. So it's going to be 1. Now at index 1, so the second iteration, array 1 is going to equal to 4. So that makes sense. Compare is now going to, that means we get inside of this function, right? And compare now becomes 4. And we run all the way through this guy. So compare at start is 4. Compare, and then we run through this dude again and compare at start is 4. Hold on, what happened here? As we go to the third iteration, compare stays at 4. That's because, let's uncomment this dude out and save it. That's because we don't hit this function, right? We don't hit this guy on the third iteration because 3 is less than 4. It hasn't fulfilled our condition that we've set, so it doesn't reset compare. So I'm going to go ahead and Control K this guy. I'm going to run it one more time, and let's check a look. Let's take a look at the full at the full everything. So we made it to here at the start. Compare is compare. So first iteration, second iteration. All right, let's look at this guy right here. Here we go. So as we get into the third iteration, right, which is going to be right here, compare is now 4 because we've set it in the previous iteration because 4 is greater than 1. Well, now array I, so at the third index, I'm sorry, at the second index of the array is equal to 3. And compare is going to stay 4 because it hasn't met the requirements that we've set it here to come down and change compare again. So we stop right there, and we now immediately move to the second part, to the next iteration, which is 7. So array I is 7, and as again, compare is going to be 4. That's exactly what we thought it was going to be. Well, now 7 is greater than 4, so it meets our condition. So it's going to come down here and change 4 into 7. And let's look at this one more time as we go through 15. So one of the last iterations, the second to last iteration, or the first last iteration, it's going to be 15, right? Compared to start was 10. Now it's going to be 15. As we come to the last iteration at 2, it's going to stop again because 15 is greater than 2. So that's kind of how you set up dynamic variables to make sure that you get what you want. If you set something inside of here, it doesn't really have access all the way through. But if we, as far as these two functions are concerned, right? But if we set it here statically and then we change it inside of here and set it again, right? Then that's how we can push everything around. So Control K. So if we comment this dude out and we uncomment this, we save it and we run it, we can go ahead and check this guy out. So I'm going to uncomment it. Save it. I'm going to run it again, guys. Sorry. Cool. Let's notice what's going on here. We set our variables outside of the function. That way they can be passed in and change as they go. If we were to set var age and var person in here, they would statically be reset each time. Statically be reset. They would be reset at the beginning of every iteration. But if we call them on the outside and we allow them to change as they're passed down through the functions, we're able to maintain, we're able to hold on to what we want. And so if we remember when I went through and I said compare, notice that it at the age start never changes from 62 because it never meets the requirement to get down in here to the second part of the if statement and change 62 because none of their ages are greater than 62. There's a lot more. I mean, this is like basically simple stuff now at this point from the first video. We know what famj.age is. We know that's a number inside of an object, and we know that famj is the object. It's the same thing that I did down here at the bottom, right? At each certain index, we're going to reset so that we have access to the object. So hopefully that helps you guys kind of understand what's going on in all of this. The best advice that I can give you when you're stuck or if you're not really sure why something's working the way it's working, console.log. Console.log everything all the time. And it really helps you kind of understand and grasp what the hell is happening. That's how I debug a lot of problems. And it also gives me a lot of answers. Like sometimes I think I know something and then I'll console.log it and I'm like, oh, I thought this was going to be different. Why is it like this? And it helps you kind of figure out what the hell is actually going on. Next video is the third homework question.